And the most difficult was not outworking your problems. I took it to his house and I gave it to him because I could directly attribute 12 jobs to him. He knew that I went through that help and he was so happy with the end result. He told every single one of his neighbors, and every single one of his neighbors said, if that guy can get a recommendation from him, we're going with him. I'll always remember I was 8 or 9 years old and my dad had told me to change the tire on the Bobcat. You know, I could barely lift these things. I had over tightened it and actually broke the stud. And like, I'm 9. So I didn't break it. You fix it. And so when you grow up in a situation like that, I mean, that it tests you, right?
Hey there, and welcome to From the Ground Up Show, the show where we encourage and inspire the next generation of free-thinking leaders by telling the stories of those that have been there, done that, and are still getting it done, building a life that they love with their hearts, their hands, and their hustle. I am your host, Eric Loden. If you guys enjoy the content, help me out. Pause the show right now. Send it to a friend. Make sure you like, share, follow, subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, YouTube, and on social media. And if you guys can click that auto download button on your favorite podcast platform, getting those early downloads really helps us in the algorithm, and that helps us move up. If you guys haven't yet, make sure you check out our merch store. That is shop.fromthegroundupshow.com. We got all the regular stuff and a few really unique items you probably won't find anywhere else with the From the Ground Up Show logo and common sayings from the show. So make sure you check that out. Today, I am pretty excited. I have Mike Goldenstein with me. Mike is a seasoned veteran of the roofing industry in a number of different facets. He owned and operated his own roofing company for a number of years. He has worked on the manufacturer side as a manufacturer's rep, and now he runs Roofle, an online platform to assist roofers in the roofing industry. So, Mike, I'm really excited to dive in and learn from your wisdom, your experience, and learn a little bit more about Roofle and what it can do for us. So thanks for joining me.
Yeah, it's an honor to be here. And yeah, speaking of going from the ground up, man, this is going to be that story of starting from the ground up to have a career that has now spanned 34 years in the roofing industry for me.
Oh man. Well, congratulations. And we can dive right in. I like to start every show getting to know a little bit about your childhood. What was childhood like for someone that grows up to start a roofing company?
So I grew up in rural Iowa on a hog farm of all things. So for those of you who know me as Goldenstein, sometimes they think I'm Jewish, and I grew up on a pig farm. So if anything, I can be your favorite Jewish pig farmer, and people find the significance of that. But yeah, I grew up on a farm really in the middle of nowhere, northeast Iowa. Closest neighbors were about a mile away. Number of 60 people kids in my class, graduating class. I think maybe 70 or 80 people that lived in the town that I grew up in, but I didn't know any of them because I was so far away from that town that it was in a different school district. So really it was just a very free childhood, adventurous, but we always had work to do. And that's kind of where, you hear that about kids that grew up on farms. That's what we did. And so that track into entrepreneurship really starts when you're, 6, 7, 8 years old, when you grew up in those kind of a situation.
Yeah, I know Harvard did a study, I was going to say 2 or 3 years ago. It's probably closer to 10 by now. I lose track of stuff all the time.
It's all the same.
They did a study really trying to drill down to what aspect of childhood, what trait, what part of your home life was most closely tied to success later in life. And, they looked at where you live, the type of family you grew up in, all kinds of things. And the greatest determining factor to success later in life was kids that grew up with significant responsibility. They had chores, they had a job, they had somebody depending on them early on. Those were the people that grew up to really succeed later in life. And I think the farm life, the ranching life, I see that again and again, just anecdotally in my life. The kids I knew that grew up that way, man, they know how to get it done when they become adults. Are you in the construction industry and super excited about the services you get from your material supplier? Did your material supplier pay to take you on an all-inclusive vacation this year? Do you always have what you need, when and where you need it? If you answer no to any of those questions, make sure you check out MacArthur. MacArthurCo.com. Give them a call and find the branch nearest you. Top materials, the best prices, and only the best service. And ask them about their customer incentive trips.
Yeah, whether it's hard or not, right? And I'll always remember I was 8 or 9 years old, and my dad had told me that I had to change the tire on the Bobcat. And, I don't know, I've never changed the tire on the Bobcat before. I could barely lift these things around, and he had set it up. And as I was tightening up the bolts, I had over tightened it and actually broke the stud. And like I'm 9, so, he's angry and all the kind of stuff and everything that goes along with that, but he refused to fix it. He said, I didn't break it. You fix it. And so when you grow up in a situation like that, I mean, that it tests you, right? And you like,
yeah.
What do you mean fix it? Like, I don't know how these things work. He just told me to tighten the bolt. I tighten it, but I can give you, story after story about, these situations I put myself into, and there was no easy way out.
Yeah.
You broke it, you fix it, or go outside and do this, and that's all you have to go on. And you have to figure out yourself, whether it's fixing a fence or, rebuilding a shed that got blown over in a strong wind, or, hey, we got to re-roof this, okay. I mean, it can't be rocket science, right? People do this all the time. So you go out and just try and kind of fix it. And when you do that for, 18 years, by the time I graduated high school, I mean, nothing was a risk anymore.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I didn't grow up on a farm in the farm life, but my dad was very involved in search and rescue and then running a roofing company. And man, me and my sister, we had big responsibilities at a young age, and there's big trust. If you didn't do what you were told to do, someone was going to get hurt bad. It wasn't just, sit here and play toys. It was, you got to pull the lever at the right time, or you got to not push the button because somebody's going to get hurt if you do. And I think growing up with that level of responsibility really prepares you for adulthood. I'm always looking for opportunities to do that with my own kids, but I'm not nearly as good at it as my dad was.
I mean, and that can be a double-edged sword too, and I do also like to tell this story because when by the time I was 14 in Iowa, they had to, you can't get your license till 16, but at 14 you could get what they call a school permit, and everybody lived in rural, and so you could drive to the school. And but again, the entrepreneurial spirit was already well engaged and you didn't have a town, so it's not like you were spending money. So I had a fair amount of money saved up, and so I bought my first car. I was barely 14, and my dad is also one that we had to go get the best deal possible. So we weren't going to go to the actual, you already know which way we're going to go, and you don't go on Facebook Marketplace. They hadn't even invented the internet yet. So this is, this is late 80s. So we drove all the way down to Lee's Summit. It was like a 4-hour drive, and to pick out at a car auction because he had a friend. We all have friends. We know somebody, and they had a dealer license, and they could buy it directly from the car auction. And so here we are in Lee's Summit, Missouri, looking at cars. I find the one, we're bidding on it. Little did I know, it's a stick shift. I'd never driven a stick shift before. And so as we're by it, I'm getting in, and my dad takes off. He's like, we'll see you at home. I was like, I don't know how to drive this thing. He's like, you bought it, you figure it out. So I'm driving it around the parking lot just to try to figure out how to drive a stick, and then drove it 4 hours home. And I tell that story because that's how I was raised. Well, by the time I got to college, this would have been, about 6 years later, kind of like the girl. And she, I had a truck by now, and it was also a stick shift. And so, have you ever driven a stick shift before? And she hadn't. And so I said, come on, I'll teach you how to drive a stick. And where this conversation is going to go, because I got her in the driver's side, and she's like, I've never driven a stick. I'm like, yeah, but you just push in the clutch, you pull it out slowly, feel the contact patch, you just kind of feather it in, and you go. And like, no, you have to tell me how this works. I'm like, no, you just do it. Just do it. To this day, I know that she does not know how to drive a stick because she was so angry at that experience because she was so humiliated, and especially being out in the campus and trying to get her to drive it around a little bit and in front of friends. Like, it was humiliating to her, but I'm like, I don't know how else to teach you. You just do it, right?
Yeah.
To this day, she doesn't know how to drive a stick, and I know it because she did end up becoming my wife. But how do we, these experiences and what we were taught, how we lived life become part of us? And myself as a teacher, trainer, and manager later on in life, I have to keep going back and saying, just because that's how I learned might not be the way that you're going to learn. And how are we going to be successful together? Because there are all kinds of different personalities, and we all learn differently and we teach differently, but we do have to get along if we're going to build this thing called a business.
Well, I guess that brings us up to college. You mentioned that you went to college. Can you tell us a little bit about your education? Where did you go to school? What did you go to school for, and what impacted that decision?
Yeah, which is interesting because when I was heading off, when I was making that decision later in my high school years, really only looked at one college. It was Taylor University. I was actually talking about that this week as I took my my fourth child. My youngest daughter is now just finished up her freshman year at Taylor, and thinking back on how God brought that decision to me, because that was the only school that I even applied for. And upon getting there, I really was pursuing computer science, which is, you got to remember, this is 1992. Nobody even owned computers back then. You didn't have a personal computer. Most people didn't. I didn't get my first personal computer until after I'd graduated college. I did love coding. I loved technology. I loved this whole thing of building things electronically, but I didn't love the dungeon. That's what we called the dungeon, is where all the computer lab was, and there was no windows there, and you would sit there for hours in coding. I kind of liked the coding, but I didn't like being in that room. So after about 2.5 years, I switched my major because I was doing a minor in Christian education. I ended up making that my major and dropping the computer science entirely. And meanwhile, about a week after I graduated high school, ready to go to college in the fall, I also didn't have a summer job lined up. And so I contacted my uncle, who also owned a roofing company. And so I went on the road, living out of a suitcase, hotel to hotel, traveling around the country, putting roofs on salt domes. And so that was my summer job for basically 5 summers, was roofing. So by the time I graduated college, that I went there for a computer science degree, ended up with a Christian education degree. Meanwhile, I was, and then by that time I talk about it, I got asphalt in my blood, and I just never could get that out. And to this day, 34 years later, I'm still in the roofing industry.
Yeah, I have a close friend that says most people don't go into roofing, you wind up in roofing. But once you get here, it's not a bad place to be.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Waffle House. You don't go there, you end up there. So roofing is kind of the same thing.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you guys were traveling the country roofing salt domes. That sounds like kind of a unique system or a unique application. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, they were built on tall concrete walls, usually between 8 and 12 feet, depending on the dome. Could be 30 feet across, could be 80 to 100 feet across. They could be very, very large, but they were built in triangular sections. So when you start at the very base of it, it's about a 21-12, if not steeper. And then slowly as it goes to the top, it gets narrower and narrower to the very top, where it's about an 8-12 at the very top of it. And that could be 90, 100 feet in the air. And so we were carrying bundles all day, every day. We would start before light because it starts getting hot. If we're in Kentucky or St. Louis or Wichita, Kansas, or you name it, we've been in December, January during breaks. I would go, and we'd be in Minnesota or New York. I'm like, hey, can we switch these over a little bit? I'd rather be in St. Louis in December and instead of Ely, Minnesota. But that's kind of where we were doing. We were hand nailing shingles, 3-tab shingles to salt domes. We would cut hip. And I don't know do you know if cut and hip? I don't know. You're a commercial guy. I don't know if you cut hip on asphalt shingles before, but these 3-tabs, you would cut the hip and ridge.
Yeah.
You would have to do that by hand. We would cut anywhere from 25 to 30 squares of hip on each dome. That's 90, anywhere from 60 to 90 bundles of hip had to be cut. And so it was very manual. You mean your hands were bleeding. And I mean, it was just, there was nothing sexy about this lifestyle, but it did get me into roofing, did get me nerdy about, the trades, and certainly taught me the value of a hard day's work, and the value of just the satisfaction at the end of the day and going, that's what I did today.
Oh man. Yeah, that's a lot of work, especially on steeps like that. And yeah, I don't envy that. So through college, you're working for your uncle doing mostly the salt domes. What happens when you graduate? Did you immediately start your own company? Did you continue working with him? What did that look like?
No, actually so I got married right out of college. So met my wife in college, and then so moved to Minnesota. That's when I started in Minnesota in 1997. We did get married in February. So I was in the yellow pages looking up every roofing company going, I have nothing. I own nothing. I have a pile of college debt, as does my wife. So let's get working. And so went through and found a couple of roofing companies that would take me on. At that point, it's in the middle of winter in Minnesota. So really the only thing available is going to be new construction. But you start your own company is what you do, and you subcontract to a company. And I did that basically for the next 3 years. I did get a job as a youth pastor during those times. And so I kind of did both of them, one to kind of support the family, and one to, my passion really was, I did love being a youth pastor at those days. And then in 2000 is when I started my own company, as, getting licensed, doing the whole thing, and then being the boss. And I did that full time for the next 12 years.
Okay. Oh man. So what was that transition like, going from being a subcontractor, kind of just providing labor, to actually starting a full roofing company? Was that a difficult transition?
Yeah. So I appreciate that question, because it was not.
Okay.
To me, it was so natural because, again, nothing is a risk anymore. Like, how many times that I had been growing up that, I don't know, just go do it. Like, I'm watching people do it all the time. It can't be that hard. And so from my background, it was kind of my second nature to just do it. Just go ahead and do it and see what it's like. And if you fail, you fail. Not a big deal. Figure it out and redo it, or do something else. And so that was probably one of the easiest things to do. As you start picking up things along the way, like it's really understanding the first time you get sued, and the first time that you had a leak, I'm like, and you're the one that's ultimately responsible, even though you didn't do the work necessarily. And you have all of these growth moments. But the fact is, the risk that it takes to take that step was probably the easiest part of the whole thing. I was 35 years old the first time I received a check from an employer that had taxes taken out of it. I'm like, what is this magic? Like, where did my money go? Because I had been self-employed my entire life, and and so actually getting licensed and going through the process, which Minnesota is a very highly regulated state, having to do it in the right way, is not a big deal at all. It really was kind of, this is the next phase of my life.
Okay. All right. What you said that getting started step was pretty easy. What was the most difficult step?
The most difficult step was not outworking your problems. So everything that I did, when you come up to a problem like this house has a deadline, or, the sun's going down, there's a storm coming, like everything and we don't have the money to pay the bills right now. The answer to every problem was work harder. And that was the hardest thing. Again, so being newly married, and then kid 1, kid 2, kid 3, kid 4, you only have so many hours in the day. And my choices in those days were to work harder. And it really throws off your work-life balance, if there is such a thing. So that was probably the hardest part. And then really understanding the way that I was doing it, because in those days, there wasn't the training. You don't have access back in then. You didn't have all the events, the RoofCon, the IRE, the manufacturers that are bringing in speakers, and you really didn't have any of that stuff. That network of information was not available. You didn't have your Chuck Tokies or your Anna Bensmans or your John Ceneks of the world back in those days. And so you were literally reinventing your own wheel, which is great, unless you're the personality of me that was more of the blue collar. I do it myself. I work harder. I'm working, 14, 15 hours a day, installing most of my own jobs. I have crews working with me, but it was not scalable. We were making good money, and I was very comfortable living, and it really got me a great base of where, even set me up for today. But it looked a lot different 20 years ago than it does today. That's for sure. The entire roofing industry has evolved significantly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's so many resources available now with, like you said, different conferences and podcasts and people willing to do trainings and coaching, and just the feel of the industry. Back then, it was pretty cutthroat. You didn't talk to other roofers because they were your competitor, and
yeah.
Now it's a very welcoming industry, I think, where most contractors are willing to help somebody out, help their competitor. They're interested in raising the bar in the industry as a whole rather than just landing the next job. And it's been really interesting to watch, even in my tenure in roofing, that I feel like it's changed a lot. I want to take a moment to tell you about our new partner, Athlete Fresh. If you work hard or train hard, you know the frustration of trying to clean sweat out of your clothes. They just aren't the same. Your clothes come out stiff and they start to smell immediately if they get even a little bit wet. Most detergents don't actually dissolve sweat. They just mask it with strong fragrances. Athlete Fresh dives deep into fabrics, especially synthetics, to break down the enzymes that produce that smell. They rinse sweat out once and for all, leaving you with clean, fresh clothes. They can even bring new life to your favorite old work clothes or athletic gear by removing the residue that other detergents leave behind. Make sure you check out athletefresh.shop/FromTheGroundUpShow.
Now, we do talk about that a little bit because it is regional. That what you're just talking about is regional. And so Minnesota, they don't mind sitting. They're very educational focused. The contractors are, and they don't mind sitting in a room with their competitors to learn the best practices. And you go to Kansas and they don't. Like, it's hard to get contractors to be together. Chicago is very difficult. You get to Ohio, Columbus is very easy. You can get, and Atlanta is very open to doing that. You get down into Texas and they don't either. Again, in the coasts, they don't. So there's different pockets as to where do you feel you rank or your role within your competitors? Sometimes it's like, I ain't giving them a time of day. I refuse to, and you're just always a competitor. And then there's just the culture of the contractor in that area says, no, I mean, rising tide raises all ships. We're good. I mean, anything that you can learn, I can learn, we learn together is only going to make the industry better. That's a regional thing to me, in my estimation.
Yeah, I could see that. I guess I've not been as involved at that level. It just seems to be a trend I'm watching. So I could definitely see that being regional.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you were a youth pastor for a long time. That was kind of your passion, and roofing was the job that supported that. Did you step away from the pastor job about the same time you started your own company there in 2000, or how did that line up?
No, actually, I was a youth pastor from basically 97 until 2006, at one capacity or another. So sometimes some of it was full-time, some of it was part-time. But it was about 2006 is when my fourth child was on the way. And, I was doing, nights and weekends with the church, and my days were with Ambassador, which is the name of the roofing company that I had. And, I was like, something's got to give. And so I gave my 6-month notice. I said, I have to be full-time at the church or full-time at the business. Like, I don't have it enough to do both. And, unfortunately, the church wasn't in the position to be able to bring on a full-time youth minister at that time. And so I went ahead and did full-time with a company, but then, I still volunteered a lot with the church, probably too much still, because we still attended the same church for several years after that. But yeah, and one of the things, and I do enjoy talking about those years, because ministry is not easy. It really isn't. And especially in the youth ministry, I did come across, those parents that are just very difficult. It's you're ministering to their kids, and my wife talks about it. She took some classes at Taylor, about being a coach's wife, and she would always talk to me about kind of that. She's the coach's wife because people aren't always very kind, even inside of a church. They're not kind, and conflict resolution is a real thing. And I thought that more than my roofing company, my years as a youth pastor prepared me for what was coming with my career at GAF, when dealing with angry or, upset customers, whether it's distributors or contractors. My years as a youth pastor prepared me for those and that conflict resolution much more than my history as a roofing company owner did.
That's interesting. That's probably not an application that most people would expect, but I can see how that would probably be beneficial.
Yeah, and then just kind of piggyback on that, I did recognize, later on, and as I was, picking up, those days at GAF were very entrepreneurial as well. They basically threw you a set of keys and said, grow market share, make your plan, and grow your engagement with your contractors. Go. And so you make your own decisions during that time. And one of the things that I recognized was, man, I wish I had access to these tools, or I knew that I had access to these tools as they were getting more popular inside of the GAF culture. And so that really was the cry of my heart at that point, was to say, this is the type of sales rep that I want to be. Is I want to bring this value and saying, hey, there's a better way. Let's simplify this. There's a better way. We want you to be successful. And so that training and educational piece to it, I wanted to be their best advisor inside of their company, inside of their business, and then grow the market that way. And so I would double down into understanding the business growth piece of it and bringing that educational piece of it. So then when we started seeing like when the storm come, and, some more of these trainers, educators, even influencers as social media started growing, I kind of leaned into those because it was just making my job better and my customers' lives better.
Okay. So you've kind of transitioned here in your story from running a roofing company now to working for GAF. What did that transition look like? Why make that change?
Yeah, I used to joke a lot, I'm going to be careful on how I say this. I thought that it was too easy being a company owner. I'm like, listen, as long as you have a nice truck, you wear a collared shirt to your sales meetings, you brush your tooth in the morning, you already separated yourself from your competition. It was a rough industry in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Oh, yeah.
But it was maturing, and I could notice that. But there was a desire that came back to me and said, man, and I also turned 35, and my body was just not, I would still work a 12 or 14-hour day, heavily physical, but my body wouldn't recover the next morning. It was hard for me to get out of my truck at night. It was hard for me to get in the truck in the morning. So physically I was breaking down. So there's a lot of things that were going on at the same time to say, you know what, I think it's time that I would like to see a transition, and was very grateful to be able to transition into an organization like GAF, which is a, multi-billion-dollar organization like that. I don't take for granted, what that opportunity looked like and how that happened and how that transaction actually happened. A transition actually happened. Quite unique.
Okay. And so what was your role then at GAF? How was that structured, and what did that look like?
Yeah. So I enjoy telling this story a little bit too, because in my territory, so my territory manager in the Minneapolis area got promoted to regional. And so when I learned of that, I called him up and said, well, who's taking your job? And I didn't really even understand what that job was. I mean, I knew him, I knew Jim well, and we had become good friends. And then Lance, who was his partner, also got promoted at the same time. So they went from hiring one to hiring two people, replacements in the same territory. So then I'm thinking, all right, this is cool. I really want this job. And then I didn't get either one of them. So they hired two other people. And I remember driving home from a job and just exhausted and like, that's when all the doubts and, I really thought this is where God was leading me. I kind of felt like this was, but now that it happened and I didn't get it, I'm really like those feelings of self-doubt and depression, kind of start setting in and really start affecting you. And, but about 4 months later, I got another call that said their composite decking division is looking for an employee. And so I put my name in for that one. Like, I built a few decks in my day, but, and it's not roofing, but, maybe I can get in my foot in the door. And so I took that job and that was my foot in the door at GAF. And that's when I started traveling. My territory I was hired for like Minnesota and Northern Iowa. And when I went to their national sales meeting like a month after I was hired, my territory was basically Minnesota, Iowa, all the way to Seattle. And I remember making that phone call to my wife and going, because I had 4 young kids at that time, like, this is going to be a beast. And, but, that only lasted 9 months because 9 months later, they closed down that division of the company. And the number of calls that I got from the other guys, what did you do? Because I tell you, all I do is break stuff. That's my job. So I broke the composite decking division of GAF, just so you know, if anybody asks.
Well, that's something you can be proud of, a little feather in your cap there. I doubt there's many people that can claim responsibility for that.
Well, it was like 2010, 2011, and the economy had crashed. They were trying to pull it back up. But, the composite, that was a, high end product, and the sales were just not there to support it. And I think GAF was probably looking at an acquisition and then noticing, the books on, if you're acquiring somebody, because there was a couple of companies that were for sale that were competitors that would have been good acquisitions, but, the margins on that are just for a manufacturer. So I think they went from, hey, we really want to get into this, double this down and grow this, to, wait a second, best case scenario, we're at those margins. No. And they ended up, instead of dumping more money in and growing it, they cut the entire thing. And so it took us all by surprise. And by Christmas time, I was a week away from losing my job. And like, I didn't know what I was going to do next. Going to go back. I mean, it's only been barely a year that I've been out of, and my company no longer exists. Try to call some distribution. Maybe I do that. And then about a week, like it was between Christmas and New Year's, a job did open up that I didn't even have to move. I got slid into the roofing side of things, which is roofing side of GAF is much more stable than the composite decking side. So let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure that was a scary experience. And so it sounds like when you shut down your roofing company, you just shut it down. You didn't sell it or pass it off to somebody else.
It's again, looking back, it's kind of interesting because most people are like, that's ridiculous. How you could have sold that. You could have done it, because it was at that point, it was a 12-year-old company. Surely it's worth something. But in 2010, the landscape of the industry wasn't like that at all. There was nothing really valuable to sell because there weren't really systems and processes that were involved. I was the company and I can't sell myself, especially if I'm exiting. And so I did contact a business broker at the time, and we put it on the market, but there was no takers. Like, there was no book of business. It wasn't a mature business nor a mature business environment. Exteriors just wasn't that in the 2000s. So, but like today, I mean, now the company is 26 years old. Of course, I haven't done anything with it for 15, but you think about that. What's a 26-year-old roofing company worth today? It's a very different landscape today than it was, 20 years ago.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned one of the things you struggled with the most was solving problems by not just simply working harder, and that you spent a good portion of your career, out of not only doing sales and running the company, but out on the roof with the guys. As you got towards the end of your time there, did the company mature past that? Were you more of a business owner than a business operator? Were you able to step up to that next level?
Not really, and I don't really regret it either. It's just my level of attention. It might have been ridiculous, but it was there. One of my sales pitches is I know where every nail is going on your roof. I'm not one of those that just sells the roof and then I don't see you until I'm collecting the check. I was on every one of my builds, and my attention to detail was to such that that was my personality, and that's how I did stuff. And would I be able to just do it? But you think about this too, but you think about the big names in tech today, the AccuLynx, Eagle View, Hover. None of that existed when I actually closed down my business. Like I'm telling you this, I don't even think Dataforma might have been around maybe in those days, so when there really wasn't a way to have you would have to really be a, pretty astute businessman and be attracted to the margins in those days for roofing, which just the margins weren't there back in those days either. So yeah, it's one of the things that's one of the things I enjoy talking about the most is because, between 97, I was there when we started using pneumatic nail guns. Like I was hand nailing shingles and I'm like, look at this thing. It plugs into air and you can there's so many changes that have happened over the course of 34 years. And, but at the same time, these changes are coming faster and faster and faster and faster and faster to where now there's more that happens in a year than would happen in 10 years, in the 90s.
Absolutely. And I'm a little bit younger than you, a little behind you in your career, but I grew up in the roofing industry. And I remember that. I remember sitting in rooms where the debate was, can guys really do as good of a job with an air nailer? Hand nailing's it's still better. And there's a lot of resistance to that. And I know my dad and I both struggled with kind of the same thing. We were very attention to detail, wanted to be on the job, wanted to know what was going on. And even with some of the technological advances, it was difficult to get off of the roof, get off of the job site and start really working on the business.
Yeah. Even some of the functionality stuff that now you have to have where do you put this monstrosity? Like I'm way faster shelling nails with a hammer. But now I got to figure out where to put this big old thing. And not only that, but I'm dragging this hose back. Well, not only that, I got to buy a compressor. Well, not only that, it's got to probably have a motor because I can't just draw it off the power in the house. Like there were so many complexities that this technology brought. It was easy for your dad and I to go, it'll never work.
Yep. I remember having all of those conversations and, okay, maybe you can put nails in a little bit faster, but you're going to lose that time when you got to set that thing down and your hammer goes in your pocket and, oh yeah. Oh man.
And now we're looking at these complex CRM systems, these instant estimators on your websites where homeowners can come on, put in their address. Now they have a quote. Now you're automating a text message or a phone call or emails to them to do this. And then you're entering them into a cadence to where, now you're continuing this and it's all generated by AI and you're sitting there going, dude, what happened to the hammer and nail?
Yeah.
I want to go back to those days.
You mentioned that technology is speeding up rapidly. The changes are coming so fast. It is just a vastly different industry. Do you see it going too far?
Too far. Well, you'd have to define what too far is. I think, yes, contractors have to adapt. They have to adapt. Now, what is too far? So, is it farther than your comfort level? Is that too far? What's too far? Too far for your homeowners? I think, your consumers are always creating the demand. As business owners, the hardest thing for us to do is we've created this thing that's ours. And we want it to perform the way that we've created to perform, but we have to separate ourselves from that entity and put ourselves in the shoes of the consumer and say, how can I fit your need? What do you, and then you have to decide whether you want to or not. Because some of them are like, I just want the cheapest price possible because I'm leaving, I'm selling the house and I'm out of here. Well, you're probably not my person, whatever the scenario is. But the fact is we have to listen and adapt to the consumer demands. And then also really understanding where the tech is giving us additional efficiencies and effectiveness, because where there's tension and where there's inconsistencies, that's where technology comes in and starts solving problems. And you can't just turn your back on it and go, it's not important, or I don't want to go there.
Yeah.
Because somebody is going to go there and they're going to just take all your work.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point and a good way to look at it. Um, So in kind of our storyline here, you shut down your business, went to work for GAF. They eliminated your job. You're a week away from losing your job right before Christmas, and finally get into roofing, which is where you wanted to be to begin with. What was your job at GAF, and how long were you there?
Yeah, I ended up being there for 12 years for the entire experience. Right away, I was in North South Dakota. That was my territory. I did it from the Twin Cities. So I always remember I was so excited because the cars were always what was it? A Ford Escape, which was just too small. I'm driving this all around in the middle of winter in North Dakota. And then we were able to, had a good year, and they kind of opened this up, and they gave us an Explorer, and the Explorer was a much nicer vehicle, larger, went through snow better. Cause again, North South Dakota here, right? I'm going up to Williston, but I only had it for a year because you had to turn it in once it hit 85,000 miles. I put 85,000 miles on my company vehicle in 1 year. I took my job very, very seriously. And again, you take that from when I was a kid, 6-8 years, I was comfortable when I was working. That was my safe spot. Just the family dynamics that I had were a little bit unique. And I felt safe when I was working. And that has always carried it through. Mike, you don't have to work that hard. Like, I get it. Yes, I do. This is how it's going to be done right. And so 2 years, I think, were spent in North South Dakota. And then I got promoted to the Twin Cities, and I was here for 8 years, grew this market share significantly. It went from about a $30 million market to a $100 million market. And then I got promoted to national accounts, was there for a year before exiting and then joining Roofle.
And I know there's a portion there. We were chatting before we hopped online here. You even slipped over into like Montana and Wyoming, and we found out we have a few common contacts and a few friends in common. So that was again, maybe not quite the 2/3 of the country that you were covering with decking, but a pretty large area that you covered.
Yeah. And these relationships have continued to grow, and that's one of the things that's really been my favorite part of it, is being a connector. It's one of the greatest joys I have in my life. And, you need to meet so-and-so. And even you and I, we met because Chris Zimmerman said, hey, you should give Mike a call, see if you do, and these people that we're meeting around the country are fantastic people. And I've appreciated that. And I've got a MacArthur that's 2 miles, mile and a half, 2 miles from my house, who, again, you think about this, like today still remains great friends. And we do stuff like I've always relied on Terry. Terry, she's fantastic. She saved me in 2008 because they opened up 2 miles from my house. I'm still a contractor. The largest hailstorm that in my lifetime, I know everybody thinks, 2017 was the biggest hailstorm in the Twin Cities. Wasn't even close. 2008 was. There was shortage of materials everywhere, but they had just opened up 2 miles from my house. So I had opened up and I'm like, whatever. I'd never heard of you before, but I'll open up an account because I'll probably pick up ice and water shield or vents or whatever. I really like my guy, who at the time was United Products. Well, when this massive storm, and we had a lot more national guys in those days, flooded the market, I got cut off at my main distributor. My rep came to me and like, I'm sorry, Mike. I mean, you're my largest account, but you don't rank. I mean, he was said it nicer than that, but the fact is I lost my way of life. I could not get materials in 2008, except for my little MacArthur that's 2 miles from my house. And Terry said, when do you need it? And for that entire summer, I never missed a delivery for the entire year. She saved my career. That was my only, source of income with my family. So that's MacArthur. And then then when I started traveling with GAF, I love going to MacArthur because I've got this connection, and meeting with John down there and traveling with him. And we're having, these 3, 4, 5, 6 hour drives down into Wyoming. We're talking about John Piper and old school theology and he's got a brilliant mind, and but you bring all of these faces and people and places together over the course of time, and you just keep having all these intersections, and it's been really a joy to be a part of uh, this roofing industry. It's been fun.
Yeah. Again, going back to what we were talking about, I guess you said maybe more regional, but even when I started my roofing career a little after you, it seemed very cutthroat, very closed off. And yeah, in the last decade or so, everybody's just kind of opening their minds, talking a lot more welcoming. And I feel like that's shifting. I've had talk to a few other people in roofing that are like, man, if you're looking to get into an industry today, there's no better industry than roofing because there's so many people willing to help you, so many connections to be made. And I love that. MacArthur was our primary distributor when I was in business, and they're actually a sponsor of the show. So our listeners will hear an ad from MacArthur if they're listening to this podcast. I have lots of similar stories where it's a big enough company to really serve your needs, but small enough that every customer matters. You don't hear that answer of you're not a big enough account. It's your neighbor, it's your friend, it's somebody in your community selling to you, and they make sure they take care of you. So
yeah, and you have the same rep. Like the same people that have been there when I was a contractor are still there today, and
yeah.
They have watched me from they remember me when I was opening up in 2007. They saw me, and I was their rep for 8 years when I was territory manager here with JF, and then now watching me and making fun of me for all the shenanigans that take part when I'm traveling around the country for Roofle.
Oh man. Well, that's a great segue. I know where you're at now is Roofle. That's kind of a passion and an exciting thing you got going on. Can you tell us a little bit about that? How did you wind up at Roofle, and what is it that makes you so passionate about it?
Yeah, so I had a contractor in town here in the Twin Cities area. They were always very innovative as a company. They were doing virtual VR in 2015, and some people are like, that doesn't really make sense. May not resonate. Guys, they were doing VR in 2015. Nobody was doing VR in 2015. And they would have a homeowners association come into their offices, put on these VR goggles. They paid tens of thousands of dollars for this. Again, now we pay $800 and we're like, that's expensive. Tens of thousands of dollars for this equipment. And they would have the association president and the group, anybody who wants to, put on the VR goggles and walk through their association and see their new window siding, gutters, roofing. That's how they sold to multifamily. Crazy stuff. Like they would sit, the executive team would sit down and go, what's missing? How can we grow? How can we innovate? Where does this industry need to go? A couple years later, they were sitting there again, having that conversation and said, what's missing? What's nobody doing? What's nobody looking at? And they said e-commerce. When is e-commerce going to hit the roofing industry? When is a homeowner going to go online, put their address in, get a price on their project, and decide and what does that process look like? Decide to have a roofer come out and do their roof. And it's been 100% online. And so they created Roofle. This would have been right about 2020, about 5 years ago. And so they figured this out, and they built out an entire website, and they became a roofing contractor that was 100% online and e-commerce platform. So homeowners would go online to Roofle, which did not exist. They didn't have a permanent location anywhere. They were in 18 states, and homeowners would come on, and then, at any point they could talk to a pro, and then somebody would come on and they would go through the sales process and they would sell the house. And then Roofle would not see the roof in person until they came out to tear it off and put a new one on. So it was 100% e-commerce. Well, about 2 years into that, they were being so successful and growing so fast that other contractors were looking at it, and the demand started coming. We need your website, or build us one. We need access, because clearly this is where the industry is going. And that decision was made then. I think it was like May of 2022. That they said, okay, we're not going to be a roofing company anymore. They shut that down entirely, became a SaaS company. So we're a subscription technology that embeds on a contractor's website. So they can basically have many of the components that we had as a contractor, put that on their website so that they can help bring this, because again, what are we doing? We're putting ourselves into the shoes of the homeowners, and because the homeowners are the ones that are creating the demand. This is how they do life. Why should roofing be any different? And so
Yeah.
that's where it came from, which then became interesting because I started with them in October of 2023. So it'd be about 6 months after they had made this transition. And then they launched 2 weeks later. And what was fun about the entire experience, and we sit back, and I actually had a conversation with Travis. He was the CEO. When we were in that day, we launched it at RoofCon, big booth. Nobody had ever heard of Roofle. And when they came to it, that was what was fun about it. Hey, have you heard of Roofle? No. Well, we are an instant estimation software for your website. And blank stares because people didn't know what that was either. Like we literally created a segment of the industry that nobody had, say that again, And so over the next 3 years, building the brand, doing the marketing, getting adoption, and then watching adoption, not just from the contractors, but you have to find adoption from the homeowners as well. Because how many homeowners, and you've probably seen this too, things that you're like, can you really get a price like this? Or is this just a gimmick bait and switch where you're promising me a quote, but all you just really wanted was my information? We've all been through those funnels too. So there was a process of adoption for even consumers to trust this process that you are going to actually get a price with a value proposition with it, because that's important too. I don't care who you are. You don't buy price. Otherwise we'd all still be driving Geo Metros, we want to know what this entails, so I want my warranties, products, good, better, best. I want to understand this whole process. And so that's why we created it. And this is why we're seeing such explosive growth to the point where, we were able to be so desirable that we were acquired in December, which was barely past our 3-year anniversary of launching the product.
Oh, wow. So what did that acquisition process look like? Have things changed at Roofle? What was it like as an employee coming through that?
Yeah. So depends on who you ask. So it takes about a year, or it took us about a year. So from when the point where, started those negotiations, and I was not much of a part of that whole process. So if you ever want to have a conversation that would be entertaining, ask Travis. He was the CEO at the time, and he's a VP of operations now with the new company. But the amount of time and work and effort, and and this because you went through probably a similar situation. How long did it take for you to?
Yeah, I was gonna say mine was a good year and a half. We ended up we started down that path with two different private equity firms and got right to the finish line with one of them, and finally ended up doing an internal sale to one of my employees. But it took me a year and a half going through all the
it can be brutal, right? Because you're doing all of this stuff while trying to grow and scale and run the company as well. So that's where we go above, and how do I say this nicely? Like, we were very intentional about the culture that we were putting together during these 3 years, so that we had the freedom that Travis knew that he could go work on his stuff, and he knew that things were getting taken care of behind him. So, but yeah, it was Kimmy, between Kimmy and Travis, they pulled off a majority of this process, and it's not easy. Not everybody can do it. And so
I think
I do want to kind of talk about it. What's that?
Sorry, I was going to say, I think I read a statistic. I guess I didn't look at the raw facts. This is an internet fact, but 65% of businesses that try to sell never do. And it's just what you talked about. It's such a process to go through the legal investigations, the quality of earnings reports, oh my gosh, it's just months and months and months of legal and accounting and stripping down your books we had to account for every penny, 40 years, where it went, what it was used for, how much we actually made, where are the checks. It was a process.
And that process is very different from a tech company as well. And so that was even crazier.
Oh yeah, you guys got your infrastructure, your software. Does this actually do what it says it can do, or do you just have a fancy website?
Yep. Yeah, learning a whole different vocabulary because everything's different, and like
Yeah.
even you're not looking at EBITDA, you're looking at your annual recurring revenue numbers and your churn. Like what's churn? Like there's all these things that you had to learn in 3 years. And again, remember we're a bunch of roofers. Like
Yeah.
this is the executive leadership team for a roofing company that said, "Hey, let's do this." And they put together this team. And frankly, that's what I was driving and talking with Travis again yesterday. And we do this fairly often. Sometimes you just stop and have to think, the team that we put together, how it was done, the intentionality. We paid attention to every little detail, from how do we treat customers? How do we sell to customers? How do we treat our salespeople? How do we treat our customer success team? How do we build this thing so that it is perfect? And I don't think we could have done a better job cumulatively. Like every single person that was part of the team had a role. We truly loved each other to be able to have something that is a high performing culture that is very respectful and acknowledging that we all come to our jobs, because there is still, this whole thing of work-life balance, and we all come to work with baggage too, and so how do we put all these pieces together and just have a spectacular experience? And we really did, to the point where we talk about it and say, that we truly built a unicorn. As much as I would love to do it again, I could work the rest of my life. Now I'm a little bit older, so it means a little bit different coming from me, but my boss I don't even think he's 40 yet. He could try this again 100 times and not have the experience that we had at Roofle.
Oh, yeah.
It was a unicorn. It was perfect.
That's incredible. Like you mentioned, we've talked about a few times. I think the industry is changing, and the modern roofing industry, there's an incredible amount of professionalism. There's fantastic people. It's awesome. But like you pointed out, I mean, back in the 90s, it was kind of a cutthroat industry, and roofers earned a poor reputation for good reason. It was a rough industry, and man, a standout in the roofing industry. Like you said, I love that. Brushed your tooth this morning. So yeah, if you said let's gather up a team to build an incredible SAS tech business, a tech platform, a bunch of old roofers is probably not
Bunch of misfits.
That's not the A team. That's not your first round draft pick. Is a bunch of roofers.
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
Yeah. So it was a magical experience. So now the part of the new company, and I describe it like this because I do have a lot of friends who are part of the private equity roll up. Private equity in the roofing industry is a big deal. And a lot of my friends, we've been walking through this path together for 15 years, and I'm watching them. And one of my good friends is Reggie Brock. I don't know if you know him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're just crossing paths all over here today. We got Chris and John and MacArthur and Reggie.
Yep. So Reggie's a dear friend and has been for a number of years. And I was telling him yesterday, I said, this any kind of private equity sale is one of the unique experiences where you go through the divorce first in hopes for a honeymoon.
Mm.
Because you have the death of an identity. You really do. Like Roofle does not exist anymore as a single entity. And as much as we want to hold this culture together, and we're doing everything that we can, and we did everything we could to prepare for this day, and it doesn't matter if it's us or a contracting company or roofing or whatever, but we're always seeing more and more reports of, since private equity took over blank, right? And there's part of me that says I refuse to believe that has to be the case. As long as we can acknowledge that these times are going to be hard because we've lost our identity, but we're gaining a new one. And for every negative, we probably have 5 positives, but we have to build on those positives and keep those in mind. It's coming. You don't start with the honeymoon. It would be nicer if we did. You actually start with the divorce, where it's the death to yourself. You're kind of the death to the company who's buying you. And then there's this rebirth. And then you look forward to the honeymoon. I mean, that's really the goal. The hard part is, and we just have to acknowledge it, is getting through that divorce without too much collateral damage, because frankly, that is the hard part. That's the biggest challenge, is how do you keep everybody together during this divorce and rebirth?
Yeah. Yeah. So What has that looked like at Roofle? And especially, you mentioned you weren't a big part of the transaction itself, but more keeping the company going while that was all going on. What has been the most difficult thing for you as you went through this transition?
I mean, on a personal level, I'm not, I don't know what to say, how to say it, but I go through those same things. I have those same self-doubts. I'm going through the death of my identity. I was kind of a very frontal piece. I was a big part of Roofle. I was a big part of their story, their go-to-market strategy, their business development. I was a big piece of that. And I may not be that big of a piece of the new company. And I have to come to grips with that. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a salesperson. I'm driven to success. I want these high-performing organism, and I might not have the say. They might not be asking me questions anymore. I'm not that guy. And I have to come to terms with that. I have to be at peace with that. So personally, I go through the same thing and that every other person at both Sales Rabbit and Roofle and Rooflink are going through. Like we all go through the same things. And that's kind of where I kind of pull Reggie back into this, because Reggie has been mentoring us as a Roofle for years now, 2.5 years of our 3.5 years of existence. And, every week we meet with him and he prepares us for these things. And a lot of it has to do with authenticity. Let's be real with each other. Let's make sure that we know that tension is going to exist. We know that collisions are going to happen. There's going to be personal friction. Let's make sure these collisions happen in the parking lot, not on the freeway. Let's keep the collateral damage down, but let's figure out how to work with each other. And then now we have to enter, and now our family just adopted a great big family. So now what are those dynamics going to look like? And we have to do that in a way that we're creating a better and a new and a healthy culture on the other side of it as well. Because the last thing we need to do is having weird competitions and it's not easy. It's just not easy.
Yeah.
But it is rewarding to get on the other side of it.
Well, I admittedly I didn't know a lot about Roofle coming into this. I knew a little bit about you and your background. I didn't know a ton about Roofle. And so the more I'm learning, I've kind of got this internal conflict of, we talked about, even though I might be a little younger, I'm kind of that old school roofing crowd of, man, hand nailing is better than an air nailer. Like there's the right way and the wrong way, and the new way is the wrong way. It was very hard for me to kind of let go of that, being in the field on the roof, doing the work myself. But I'm very much the tech guy in my personal life. If you can buy it online, there's no way I'm walking into a store to get it. Like I love the simplicity. Right? I love online and the tech. My part of my education is actually computer science as well. That's something else we share in common. But
there we go.
So just hearing your story, I'm kind of torn here of like, wow, what you're doing here at Roofle is so cool, so revolutionary. If I was buying a roof for my house, I want to get on your website and use it. But then the roofer part of me is like, but that's not the right way to do it. So I see maybe a similar tendency with you. What has that been like, coming from kind of the old school roofer that did it the old school way to now running a tech company that is at the cutting edge of kind of the new technology in the space? Has that been a difficult transition? Is that something you've had to reconcile kind of in your own spirit?
Yeah, so I absolutely have to reconcile this, right? Because, and I'll tell you a really specific story, because I was in Rapid City, South Dakota, meeting with a master elite there, and he was actually training his guys to go out and drive by the house. And if you saw the car in the driveway, just keep driving. What we do is we leave the estimate in the mailbox. Don't talk to them. No reason to. And I'm looking at it and go like, where's the value in that? Like, so you're saying that all you want my customer to see is a price. That's it. And so I started making bets with him because I knew he was better. So I said, tell you what, I'll be back here in 3 weeks. And in that time, I want you to, and I gave him very specific things to do, and I would train his sales guys to do it. And we got rid of that process. You're like, no, you need to hand it to them. But here's the thing, other thing I need you to do. I need you to, across the board, add $5 a square to your price every single week. So when I come back here, we're going to look at your books, and I want you to be $15 a square more expensive than you used to be. And we're going to track a few different numbers. We're going to track your sales, your close rate, your profitability, and I'm going to challenge you as to whether or not this is the proper way. You probably know the end of the story. The guy, his wife was in tears when because she was very much in the bookkeeper side of it. So when I was asking him, the whole story started because I said, how much do you make on an average job? And he told me it was like $500 or $600. And I said, it looks to me like you're at about somewhere between $50 and $85, and he got mad, stormed off. She started crying. She said, you're right. Because you're seeing these big checks come in, right? And they're coming in, and he was one of the larger ones. So it was always a lot of money coming and going. He didn't realize he was not making nearly as much money as he thought he was. And anyway, so we started this process and it was super successful. So now let's fast forward. Now, what did I just do? I'm joined a group that's just giving a price online. Just put your address in, we're going to give you a price. So how do you reconcile two vastly different aspects? Well, so two things that you have to think about. Number one, and you mentioned it, this is what I want. But just because you want it doesn't mean I need to give it to you, because that's not how the world works. However, you also have to understand, when I was teaching this guy how to do it, what didn't we have? The internet. The access to information now becomes the conduit by which you give your value proposition. So, especially with the younger generations, how do they value truth? Where do they find truth? And then, and the number one, like, this is what I wanted to say, is how do people trust contractors these days? Where does that trust come from? How do you build trust? It looks a lot different than it did 15 years ago. 15 years ago, I came to your house. I sat at your kitchen table. We talked about what we had in common. We gave the value proposition. You were, in those days, and this is a stat, is you were 20% of the way through your decision-making process. I, as a salesperson, came to your house, gave you your bid, and got you the rest of your 80% until you were 100%. You signed the contract and we did your work. In 2026, you are, as a consumer, 90% of the way through the decision-making process. And how did you get there? Well, through the process of going online, looking at the contractor's website. You see their About Us page. You see their certifications. You see their warranties. You see all this value. Their, the reviews. Are you local? All of these things. And now you get a price to this. But if you're not getting those questions answered, guess what you're doing? You're going to the next contractor.
Yeah.
And so everything has changed. So yeah, am I giving a price? And my answer to that is, I hope not. Because if I'm giving you a price, I want you to also see my reviews. I want you to see my trucks. I want you to see the people. I want you to, it's going to be at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, midnight, but you're seeing it on my website. I'm developing that trust. I'm giving you that value proposition. It's just done online rather than in person. Now, does the transaction though, and is e-commerce really the true? Now we can start getting into and dicing this up. Is e-commerce really going to come out of this? My answer to that, I don't know, because I think it's going to look a lot like the automobile industry. Is Carvana taking over the world? No, not really. People still want to go. Now, they're doing all of their exploration online, but they're not actually swiping a credit card to buy a car necessarily. Carvana has 8 to 10% market share, something like that. They still want to drive that car just to make sure this is what they're really looking for and wanting to do. I think roofing is going to continue to be like that. They want to know all the information. They want the price. They want to be able to shop, your options. Do you want a good, better, and best? And good, better, and best, which one is the most popular? They want all of the information, but ultimately they're going to end up doing that transaction in person.
Okay. That's an interesting take. And Yeah, I can relate to a lot of that. I love the used car. Like, you do all your research online, but you still want to go see it, feel it, touch it, talk to somebody, hand them a check. Just putting a credit card number in online. There's some purchases that just doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you're at that initial stage, like you need a new truck. Hey, honey, grab the kids, put them in the car. We're going to the dealerships. And you're going to go to dealership to dealership to dealership. You're going to spend a whole Saturday just to try to look at inventory. What are you doing? You're looking for the exact same thing that you have at the end of your fingertips. Nobody's going to do that. So that's why I take, regardless of if you agree with me or not, the fact is, if you want to continue to be that used car dealership that has no digital presence online, guess what's going to happen? You're waiting for that guy who wants to get the kids into the car with his wife and go dealership to dealership to see inventory. Guess what? You are going to cease to exist. I'm sorry. That's
what I was going to say. Carvana might only be 8 or 9% of the market, but your average used car dealership down the street is 0.0001% of the overall market. Like 8% of an entire market, that's a big market. If Roofle could own 8% of the entire roofing market, that's a win. That's a big market, and that's an asset that people need to be offering.
Yeah. So really the idea is that in used car markets, 95% of the process of buying a car, for a consumer to buy a car, 95% of it starts online, 85% of it ends in person.
Mm.
And that's kind of what we're telling the contractors as well. So a roofing contractor who's a subscriber for Roofle, we actually white label this, embed it right on your website, because the homeowner has to deal with you, not with us. They have no idea who we are. So they come to your website, put your address in, see that. Now, here's what most people miss. They are also consuming 66 pages of content before they make a final decision. 66 pages of online content. Most of the time when I'm asking that question in a group of people, they're saying 1 page. We have the attention span of a guppy, 1 page, half a page, 2 sentences, whatever. You got to remember, they're watching videos. They're reading your reviews. They're looking at a lot of things, and because they have access to a lot of things. So they're making their decisions based on all this information they have, which is why 95% of it starts online. But I think about 85% of it is still going to end up in person, which is why you want those, not just getting that lead from your technology on your website, but also doing the follow-up to be able to secure that appointment in order to finalize that contract.
Yeah, it's a both and, not an either or.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Awesome. Well, that sounds like a great tool. I guess my last question about Roofle is, when is it going to be available for commercial applications?
So it is already, and we do have some subscribers that are doing it, but most people are, the big chunk of our subscribers are doing it for single family, because that's where the, homeowners are driving their traffic to the website. And it's a homeowner experience. Yeah. Where we're seeing in commercial, it actually works better for commercial than it does for residential, frankly.
Really?
But
okay.
Well, because it's a lot easier. So we have the ability to get number of squares, pitch, and complexity in less than 3 seconds. Well, we already know the pitch on all the commercial buildings, like it's flat, right? Here's where it's tough, is that if you own a large warehouse space that's got a flat roof on it, am I going online and doing a search for roofer near me? Maybe, but probably not, right?
Yeah.
So now, where our subscribers that do a lot of commercial, what they do is they will set up their because you get, up to 8 different options. So if you're doing flat roofs, I want to give you a TPO, an EPDM, a coatings option, and a repair option. So that business owner can put their address in and see, okay, so I can do this and get an EPDM, a TPO, a PVC, at a coatings. And so now I have that ballpark price. Generally speaking, what we're seeing, though, is in those applications is they are actually calling their contractor of choice. So you would actually equip your inside sales rep or their inside any of your workers. So when a call comes in, hey, I'm looking for a estimate on this thing, well, hold on a second, get your information, and then send it to them before the phone call's over.
Okay.
Again, the business owner that's got this warehouse doesn't know, is this a $30,000 roof or a $300,000 roof? I have no idea.
Gotcha.
And if I'm doing coatings, maybe it's, 30% of that cost. But like, there's a lot of information, but I just want to know, get me started. Help me get started. Can I afford this now? Do I need it in the future?
Yeah, okay. So it's more that
So,
getting in a ballpark, a rough estimate, rather than a
yeah.
firm, okay, I can click buy, put in my credit card number, and be done.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Because in commercial, I don't know how many, I don't know how many refrigerator devices you have up there. I don't know the metals that, the trim metals that you
Exactly.
need.
That was
No.
commercial gets so varied. And do you have
Yeah.
4 roofs up there already and we got to tear it off? Is it wet? Are we talking
Yep.
new insulation package, structurally sloped, tapered insulation? There's so many variables that you really can't.
Yep. But what if I can help eliminate some of those variables in a way that's understandable to you, Mr. Building Owner? We can
Yeah.
do this on a quick conversation in the midst of 15 minutes. Can I come up and I need to just verify some of these variables for you? Now it makes a lot more sense. And what did I
Yeah.
do? You just earned my trust, because what are you not doing? You're not giving me I'm not going to tell the price until you and I have a conversation and I waste 3 hours of your time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. I can see some value in that. So, well, I want to roll back and, you've, yeah, been in ministry, you've worked as a subcontractor, you've owned your own business, you've worked as a manufacturer's rep, and now at Rufo, you just have a vast array of experience and knowledge, kind of all in the roofing industry and in leadership and dealing with people. So I want to tap into that a little bit today. What advice would you have for a young person looking for a new career that wants to do what you've done, that wants to pick a trade, an industry, a field, and just kind of advance and keep going? What would be your advice? Education, fields to look at, when your kids are headed off to college or graduating high school, what advice do you give them?
Oh, it's such a great question. And yeah, and I do have 5 kids. So my fourth one is a freshman, and I just went and took her to. She's volunteering at a camp this in the off season. My other son he's in the middle of taking his MCATs right now. So
Okay.
he wants to be a doctor. So yeah, my kids are all over the place. My oldest is a roofing salesman for a local company here. And my other daughter just graduated with her master's degree last weekend. So they're all over the place, right? Here's the point, though. What I love about it is we have always encouraged their effort, not their results. So our kids, if I don't care if they got a C or an A plus. If they didn't do any work and they got an A plus, we still encourage, we still celebrate the effort, not the result. And when I look at my youngest, who knows if he's going to go to college at all, but he will always be a lifelong learner. And that's number one. Always be a lifelong learner. And that doesn't necessarily mean college or junior college or high school. It doesn't matter. And I feel like when I learned the most in my life, to where, so you could go on Building Experts Institute. Sounds really fancy. It's an online course. It's all on code compliance. I teach this class. I didn't learn that in college. I learned that because 20 years ago, I was sued for $450,000 when I was just a one-man entity, and I was pretty scared. And what did it make me do? It made me dive into the manufacturer's installation instructions, the Pro Field Guide, and code, and defend my processes of installing a roof assembly. And so I dove into that stuff and I owned it, right? And I owned up to, and then end up, it ended up being a pretty frivolous lawsuit that I had no problem getting away from, but it was scary because this is my lifeline. This is
Oh,
what I
man.
built.
So I gotta hit pause here. How do you, I'm assuming this is a roof on a personal residence. How does that end up being a $400,000 lawsuit?
Yeah. So I was doing a lot of new construction. This would have been like 2002, 2003. And I was still doing a lot of new construction in those days. So I think it was about 1,000 square between 8 or 10 buildings, something like that.
Okay, so
And
it wasn't one homeowner, one home. It was
mm-mm.
like a subdivision that you're doing for a GC or something.
No, and and this is good stuff to talk about, right? Because it wasn't even something that they saw in my roof. It was actually I think it was like a $3 million lawsuit against the builder. And so they sue everybody that put a single ounce of effort into this project. What was really at issue, in my understanding of it, was the depth of the driveways and the privacy fence that was installed that they didn't like. And they wanted $3 million. And so they sued everybody that did anything. So this is the politics of owning business, the joys of being a business owner. So I get served papers and I open this thing up. I'm a 28-year-old that's got a 3-year-old company that I'm still up on the roof installing every single day. And I get sued for $450,000. Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
I've got a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old at home. And so it took me back. Okay, let's go back to the basics. Let's get everything I can. And basically you have to become your own attorney. And so
yeah,
through that process, I kind of figured it out, and I was able to mark a lot of stuff. I took it to my attorney. Again, it wasn't a big deal because what happens is you have to give up your, so this is Minnesota. We're a highly regulated state. And so I had to have, my insurances. So the insurance company is the one actually getting sued. Of course, there's limits to this, so I'm scared anyway. But my attorney calls me. I come in. I have this 40-page document demanding $450,000. And I have a pro field guide and installation instructions in the code book all marked up that's addressing all of their 30 or 40-page document. And the attorney looked at me and picked up the phone and fired his expert. Said, this is way more thorough than I could ever do. And he allowed me to sit in through the entire process. So again, what did I do? I learned through that entire process because I heard every conversation, every back and forth. The judge came in, as they were doing all the demands. And it was that really said, I am a lifelong learner. I am going to not just say what I think is true. I am going to find out what's true. And I'm going to defend it in writing. What are the published and approved installation instructions from the manufacturer? Because it matters.
Yeah.
So I need to know what those are. And so that kind of springboard that. So be a lifelong learner and is number one, first and foremost. And secondly is be a connector. And for however you want. And to me, that's about loving people. If you don't like love, value people, doesn't matter. I've never regretted having a relationship with somebody. And I was talking to my son, my oldest son, who called me last night. He was so excited because he's a salesman for a roofing company during the year. And Dad, I got invited to apply. He's going to, and he's got all these certifications. His life love is racing cars. And he has the opportunity to maybe, and he thinks he's going to get it, become a coach, a driving coach for exotic cars during the wintertime. Tell me that isn't the coolest thing ever.
Yeah,
right?
That's awesome. Are they taking applications?
Right. So, I mean, it's a long process to get to this point, but here's my response to him. This is literally last night. It was like 10 o'clock at night. I said, Peyton, do you remember how this started? He's got this organization that has invited him to be part of this experience. And he and I were on a retreat, a men's retreat with our church. And we were sitting there talking about, I don't know, the group of guys. And I started making fun of this guy's shirt that was, again, I'm a roofer. I'm this idiot, but had racing cars. I'm like, and I made fun of his shirt because it was something racing that I didn't understand. And I started up that conversation. And as my son who's sitting next to me and this guy that we'd never met before, and we went back and forth, and turns out it's his father-in-law that owns this organization that does these things. And then they connect, and this was a year and a half ago, they connect, exchange numbers, and they've been talking for a year. And he has been helping my son throughout this last year and a half get to a place where he now has a very reputable experience log that he can do something like this. I said, if I hadn't said anything about his sweatshirt at this men's retreat, we would never know about this thing even existing, or that we have put these pieces together. So I don't care who you are. If you're in high school, you're in middle school, I don't care. Even if you're in college or not in college, maybe you're in a dead end job. Every conversation matters.
Yeah.
Every conversation matters. I was at an Owens Corning event and talking to this guy, and I didn't know who he was. But we started making. I'm the guy that's just making jokes or making fun, whatever. And we started talking about tech, and I kind of clearly this guy's from tech, and we started talking back and forth. And he asked me, I can't remember the question he asked me, but I said that's a really interesting question. I got dead serious, and I said one of the joys of my life right now is I'm working with a team, and we're watching the success of a tech company. We're a bunch of misfits, but we love what we do, and we're very connected uniquely to each other and to the industry. And we're watching it. And I'm telling you right now, this thing doesn't happen without this exact group of people. This team is the only way to do that. I said, it's a surreal experience I've never experienced before. And I watched him and he actually got emotional. It was like, I swear I saw a tear. The guy was from, he was from Acculinks.
He's been there.
I know exactly what you're talking about. He was one of the founder. He wasn't the founder, but he was like, I think he was like the 5th, 6th, 7th who was ever employed there. And he told me his story of when he was there. And he said, Acculinks never would have grown if it, not just that you had people there, but you had those people there doing those things with the skill set that they had. And it's a rare thing, but it's so much fun, when you start collaborating at that level and feeling that level of experience and that level of success. And those things only come from connections that you make and relationships that you make and people that you invest in, whether they're deserving of investment in it or not. I've never regretted having a relationship with somebody.
That is some fantastic advice. And I can tell you, I have regret sitting on the other side of the table. I've kind of always, or when I was younger, I discounted the value of connection. There were times I looked down on it. Oh, they only got to where they're at because of their connection. They didn't work for it. That was handed to them. They had an opportunity nobody else had. And I put my head down. I'm the guy that when I get on an airplane, instead of talking to the person in the seat next to me, hat on, headphones in, clearly communicating. I don't want a conversation. I'm going to watch my movie. Leave me alone. And the older I get, the more I live life, the more I see the value. It's not that you don't still work for and earn it. You have to do the work, but those connections are just invaluable of just connecting the right people. And I mean, even just us talking today, the mutual connections, the mutual friends, people and connections make the business world move. They make the world go round. And the more you can connect, the more relationships you can build, the farther you're going to go in this life. And that's something I wish I would have done a lot earlier on. I kind of had I'm just going to do my own thing. I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to work hard and I'm going to let my work speak for itself. And people are going to recognize my work. And, there's value to hard work, but there's a lot of value to relationships.
Yeah.
So you say you never regretted a relationship. I often regret that I didn't build more. So that's some good advice.
And sometimes the harder ones, and I learned that one early on. I was doing a project and the guy was, he was so hard to work for. I mean, he was in the front yard, sitting in his lawn chair, yelling and watching every single thing. He went up, and I swear he had a magnifying glass, making sure every nail was exactly right. I think I went up there and I mean, the guys were just furious with me, but I said, no, you do what he says. And because he would look and if he even saw a nail underneath a shingle, and we took out dozens of shingles and replaced them at his. I remember coming to my wife and like this, it makes me want to quit. Like, I just want to fold the business. I never want to have an experience like that for the rest of my life. I'll tell you less than a year later, Home Depot was running a sale for, and this is in the days when they were starting to come out with these really cool battery powered toolkits. I think I got like a 11 pack or something like that.
Yeah.
I saw it, it was like $500 or $600, but it was on sale. I'm like, this is awesome. I bought it. I bought one. I took it to his house and I gave it to him because I could directly attribute 12 jobs to him because he knew that I went through that hell that he put me through. And he was so happy with the end result. He told every single one of his neighbors, and every single one of his neighbors said, if that guy can get a recommendation from him, we're going with him. And so, it is. I mean, the number of times that I want to burn a bridge because they're hard to deal with, or I don't like them, or they're mean to me, or they're not, doesn't matter, whatever reason it is, man, just you can, absolutely. It's your choice. You can burn that bridge, and maybe sometimes you should. Not saying that you shouldn't, but I don't. And there's most times I just refuse to, and I think I'm better off for it.
I agree wholeheartedly. And I know I've actually reflected, I think some of our best customers, our raving reviews, are not the jobs that went perfectly. They're the jobs that had problems, but we handled it well. And it's stepping up to that challenge, stepping up to do things right, to love people. We had 5 core company values. That was the first of our company value, was we love people. So when you love people, take care of people, serve people, when you do the right thing, even when it's hard, sometimes that speaks louder than doing a job with no problems.
Yeah. It is funny. One of my side projects, some of the thing that I started doing just because I think it's because I entertain myself, which is kind of a bad reason to do stuff, but I just do it. That's why I started doing my Facebook and social media stuff. And about 2 years ago, year and a half, 2 years ago, we hired a gal, Tara, and and she's actually good at it, and so I was her supervisor. And so, I was encouraging her to do more content because it just, everything she did just worked. But it's like everything else. Like we all have our insecurities and we all have these things. I can't really do it that way. And one of the things that we joke about a lot is like, Terry, you just don't really like people that well, do you? I don't. I just really don't. And just being real with that and encouraging her in that. And we did, again, it was this morning, yesterday, 2 days ago, having that conversation. I'm like, Tara, are you kind of loving people now? I mean, is this kind of a thing? She's like, I know, I really am. And she started talking about how much her life has changed over the last 6 months. She's like, I like people, and that kind of stuff is reflected in, even as silly as social media can be. People respond to authenticity. People respond to, everything from the kindness to the silliness to the humor to the seriousness. And, when you put yourself out there, and especially if you're being a little bit vulnerable, specifically, I think she took a screenshot and said, other girls post my post, and hers had such a hideous look on her face. Like it just caught her at a weird moment. And she's like, that's funny. And that became the cover of the video that she did. And I responded to her. I said, I bet you're going to get a lot of people, girls, like contacting you, whatever, maybe in person, or if you're at an event or in DMs or something, saying, I resonated with that. I saw your courage in that because I feel pressured. I have to look a certain way all the time. And because I think Tara's text was, this is my biggest fear. And here I'm just broadcasting it. And I said, it's not just yours, it's mine. It's everybody's biggest fear. And when you're being vulnerable in that way, you're making everybody else feel like it's okay. I don't have to be perfect. And just this life-giving experience that comes out of that level of authenticity, and to where people are like, all right, I like that. I want to be like that. I wish I could be like that. I wish I had that courage. And it opens up a whole new adventure in your life.
Oh, I love it. We started talking about roofing, kind of business in general, and now we're just getting good life wisdom. You're full of all kinds of wisdom. That's good stuff right there. Is there an opinion that you once held strongly that you've changed based on your experiences?
That's a question that's probably been asked of me like 3 times in the last month. It's funny.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, and the reason is because I think there's a lot of people that they wish that they would, but they don't. And when you're looking at especially religion and politics in America today, people don't change. They don't change their minds, and the things that they held fast as a kid, they still hold fast to today. And part of what happens is you close yourself out to healthy debate. And, in biblical times, the men of the city would actually gather in certain places and they would engage each other in debate. And I think it's a healthy thing. And I think one of the things that it goes directly to personal attacks. It has nothing to do with following a logical argument anymore. And we are closed to changing our minds. We will not change our minds. I feel like I've had a lot of things that change in my mind. And a lot of that has been, a result of me saying, I would never, that's not that way. But then saying, but why isn't that? And then challenging myself to, wait a second, back up, hear it out, let's figure it out. So there's I subscribe to some pretty weird, I think unconventional things that most people wouldn't think of that I would be. So for example, I was adopted as an infant. So I spent about 3 months in foster care and then was adopted. And then my wife and I have done foster care for 13 years. We haven't for the last couple of years. My youngest son is adopted out of foster care. We've had between 40 and 50 children through our home over the course of that time. And I refuse to get political about foster care or abortion, which is a huge change. My votes will reflect a pretty conservative, as you would expect. But I feel like Jesus was so good at getting to the heart of questions. And when the Pharisees, specifically, you see this a lot, when the Pharisees would say, is it this way or this way? Trying to trap him.
Yeah.
And he would say, you're thinking about it wrong. It's not that way, and he would change it. He would create this new thing and say, you're not even asking the right question, and there's some things that are like that where our, the philosophy that has emerged in American politics and religion, evangelicalism, nobody's immune to it at all. Has come to different things. So, for example, one of the stats that really changed my mind about all of this is a ministry called Save the Storks. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. Matt Maher, I heard about it from a concert that I was at with him. It is an organization that exists for one purpose and one purpose alone. They have, what do you call it? You get an ultrasound. They equip mobile ultrasound units so that any pregnant woman in America can have an ultrasound with their child. And the reason why that exists is because once a woman has seen an ultrasound of their child, there's an 85% chance that they will not choose to abort it.
Yep.
So you tell me, how important is my vote to have the United States federal government define, or the state government, this is new, so this is all the states. Now it's up to the state. I don't care. If as a Christian, if as a man of faith, as a man who has values, I don't care what direction you want to go to this. If I know that internally, if a woman can see their child in an ultrasound, they have an 85%. You know what? They don't care about the laws anymore. They don't care that the federal government chooses one way or another for them. It doesn't matter. So, again, that's just one example. Yeah, I'm okay with being pro-choice because I don't believe that the government is the place to regulate the heart of a person. Now, do I vote one way? Absolutely. I absolutely do. Yeah. So as a person who was adopted myself, I've adopted foster care. You would think, well, you're pro-life, pro-life, pro-life. And I am, but I also know that there is value, how should I say this, authoritarian value in a government making that choice.
That's good. Well, thank you very much for your service to our culture, our society, being a foster parent and loving people that way. That's an issue that my wife and I feel very strongly about, and we we feel very strongly for those that choose to foster. We tried that in our home and found that just our home, and maybe at that time we were just not equipped and ready for it. We might want to circle back and do that again at another time. But that's a topic close to our heart. We love to support foster parent organizations, and it's not the national organization like that, but we support very strongly a local organization that provides those same services for women in our community to let them have an ultrasound and see that baby. And so I guess just let me say thank you for your service to our culture, our community, our nation, in loving children that way. That's a big deal.
Yeah, and it's an honor, and but it is. I mean, it's hard. I don't. It's not. I don't know that it's always. It introduces chaos into your home pretty much 110% of the time. And so it's not for everybody, but it is a calling. And my wife is the absolute saint that really pushed this the whole time. Because again, you've heard me. I was traveling a lot. I've traveled a lot in my career. And she has always been that rock that has really felt called by God to be a foster mom. And she's really good at it. And I thank God for her every day for the effort that she's put in over those 15 years or 13 years, whatever it was. We haven't been doing it recently just because we've got a 9-year-old that demands a lot of our attention, and it's hard to introduce more chaos than what we already have.
That might be kind of where we were at. We tried to do it pretty early on when we had really young kids, and there was some disruption to the birth order, and might be something that we have to. Yeah, it might be something we have to revisit here as our kids grow up a little bit, but. Man, parents that do foster parenting and love kids in that way, that's a special calling. Those are special people. And yeah, God bless you. That's amazing. Is there a major mistake that you've made in one of your numerous careers or in life that you wish you could have avoided or you would have done differently if you could do it again?
So I am a colossal failure. I make lots of mistakes. And there's a lot of reasons for lot of mistakes. I think I'm one of the best mistake makers on the planet. And I'm actually kind of okay with that. And do I have some regrets? I do. I regret the way the end of my career at JAF went. I regret it desperately. But at the same time, would I do anything differently? I believe that through that, God ordained this career that I have with Rufel. I do believe beyond a shadow of a doubt, because there were so many crazy things that were happening in that last year that if I had done things differently, I think it would have still been the same result, because I believe that God had ordained there to be a divorce in that relationship. I really thought I was going to be a career GAF guy and a lifelong GAF guy. There's not very many people on the planet that can make a mistake like I can make mistakes, but they just become part of my story and become part of the success later on.
I would disagree. I think probably all of us make those mistakes. You might just be the one with the humility to recognize it.
I mean, I've made some pretty big mistakes. Yeah. I made people like, okay, where did that come from? I don't know. I just, it made sense. Okay. So I'll tell you one really quick. Now, this isn't a really bad one, but it's one of those that so I had a guy from college, email probably like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, something. He had actually kept a journal of high school years, which to me this time, like 30 years later, like that's kind of fun to do. So I'm sitting here, I'm reading through this thing. And the number of times I actually come up in it because of all the dumb things that I did. Like, I'm sure that made sense at the time. So I send this to my daughter, who's now a freshman at Taylor at my alma mater. And she's reading through this and going, Dad, you were crazy. She's like, what about this one? You guys were out camping and it was raining. You're having a hard time with getting fire. So you thought you would start the fire in the bed of your truck, drive it across the campground so that you had it. And by the time we were getting there, like, it was blazing. I had this blazing fire in the back. I'm sure it made sense at the time, honey. Just relax. I'm sure if that had caught, the bed of a truck is right next to the gas tank. Like, if there was an explosion, can you even imagine what the report would be in the newspaper? Like, okay, so there's this idiot who thought it was a good idea to start a fire in the back of his truck and then drive it across so that they had firewood in their campfire. Like, I'm telling you, I make really bad mistakes.
Okay. That's a good one.
I have one.
Yeah, I think that's called being a adolescent male, because I can recount a few. Oh man, if I start rethinking high school years, college years, it's a miracle that I'm alive.
Right. And these days, it's all on video because somebody's pulling out their camera and taking a picture.
Gosh.
Look at this moron putting fire in the back of his truck.
That terrifies me. If I had been a decade later, I would be dead or in jail. Right. The things that me and my friends did and got up to, I just thank God there is no video evidence. If there was, oh man, these coming generations, it's a bit terrifying for me. I think just being an adolescent male is going to become a punishable offense, because we all make mistakes. We all do stupid things, and now they're recorded forevermore. They're on the internet. You can never get away from it. It's terrifying.
And not only that, and we don't need to spend time on this. I'm not quite ready. I love putting on the tinfoil hats, but maybe not today. But then they can get cut and sliced and manipulated, and now you have something completely different that's promoted to the entire world. Lives are changed just with video editing, and then we got to start talking about AI. I'm very grateful to have grown up in the 80s and 90s. Because this is a very concern. This is a big concern for me.
It is
going forward.
It is. We do our best to limit our kids' exposure to some of that. But my only hope is maybe because of all of that, it'll just be so overwhelmed and so unbelievable that it'll get back to where it doesn't matter anymore.
I kind of think it might. I really do.
When you hit the point that you cannot trust, cannot believe what you see with your own eyes on a screen, there's going to be a point where it all becomes meaningless, and we can go back to only trusting, only believing what we actually see in person.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, I know we're kind of bumping up against our time window here. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I have a few questions I like to ask every guest. We've talked about this a little bit, but just to bluntly state it, let you kind of throw it out there for everyone to hear. Are you a person of a particular faith tradition? And if so, how has that shaped your life and your leadership?
Yeah. So specifically denomination, I consider myself a mutt. I have been Lutheran, Baptist, Pentecostal. I've been pretty much all around and back, because I'm now back to Lutheran again. I'm a Bible believing Christian. I've been changed. My life has been changed by doing a couple of study tours to Israel. It will absolutely change your life. It'll change the way that you read the Bible. It really takes it outside of that, just kind of I think the echo chamber that we can get into as an evangelical in the Western United States. There's a different flavor to it that brings the Bible alive when you put it into context. And it's important to understand the geography and the philosophy. What were the philosophers saying? What were the teachers saying? Why were they saying it? Where were they saying it? The geography, the politics is all really important. And once you see that, your life has changed. Your experience with the Bible has changed. And so that's kind of my explanation of my history of my denominational leanings and background.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you for that. And I appreciate your faith and how bold you are with it, and the way that that's clearly impacted your life and serving the communities that you're in. Our last question I asked most guests to either fuel or settle the debate: if you have a job to do that requires a cordless tool, which brand do you prefer?
Oh, that's not fair. That's not fair. Because I have to be embarrassed. I was always a DeWalt guy. I always was. And so today I have 2 DeWalt drills. So I'm a DeWalt. But I know that my son, who is a gearhead, and he has all Milwaukee. And I understand Milwaukee's a better tool. and he's got all of the tools. And so, yes, I'm insanely jealous of his Milwaukee, but I personally own DeWalt.
Okay. All right. Well, those are our two front runners. We've had a few people with other answers. I think right now DeWalt is actually in the
They're
lead.
wrong, because those are the only two answers. Like, I could see someone going one way or another, but
Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you so much. This really has been a pleasure. It's been a lot of fun discussing areas of life where we kind of intersect and overlap. And you just have so much experience, so much wisdom in the roofing industry, in the tech industry, and just in life in general. I really appreciate you taking so much time to chat with us. And I think it's going to be a great benefit to our listeners. So thank you.
well, I appreciate the time. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. And thank you guys for joining us again here on From the Ground Up Show. Again, if you enjoy the content, if you get something out of it, make sure you like, share, follow, subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, YouTube, social media. You can find us anywhere. Share this episode with a friend. Make sure you click that auto download button. And until next time, keep grinding.